Europe's digital gatekeepers have just collided head-on with the most unpredictable billionaire in modern politics. Right now, as you're watching this, a €20 million fine from Brussels is spiraling into a confrontation that could reshape how 340 million Europeans access online speech. This is no routine regulatory warning. This is a power struggle over sovereignty, control, and the future of digital freedom. And the real question tonight is chillingly simple. Did Brussels just provoke a rebellion it cannot contain? To understand how we reached this boiling point, we need to rewind the clock and examine the architecture of power that has been quietly constructed over the last decade. The European Union did not wake up one morning and decide to fine a global tech titan. This moment is the culmination of years of institutional ambition, ideological framing, and regulatory engineering. After the turbulence of the mid-2000s, Brexit, migration crises, the rise of populist parties across Italy, France, Germany, and Eastern Europe, Brussels began redefining its mission. It would no longer be merely a trade bloc or economic coordinator. It would become a values superpower. That phrase wasn't accidental, it was deliberate branding. Central to that strategy was digital governance. European leaders argued that American tech companies had amassed unchecked influence over speech, commerce, and even elections. The narrative hardened after controversies involving misinformation, election interference allegations, and content moderation disputes. Brussels saw an opening. The Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act were introduced as the solution. They were presented as common-sense frameworks to protect users, ensure transparency, and prevent monopolistic abuse. But buried inside those lengthy legal texts were sweeping enforcement powers, massive fines, compliance audits, risk assessment obligations, and the authority to demand structural changes to platforms' operations. At the center of this push stands European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. A seasoned German politician with deep establishment credentials, she positioned herself as the defender of European democracy against what she described as digital chaos. In speech after speech, she insisted that large platforms must respect European rules or face consequences. Enter Elon Musk. When Musk acquired his platform and reshaped it under a banner of expanded speech latitude, he signaled a cultural shift. He reinstated controversial accounts. He publicly criticized centralized moderation policies. He framed himself not merely as a CEO, but as a defender of digital free expression. From the beginning, this was a collision course. Musk openly questioned whether bureaucrats in Brussels should dictate global speech norms. European officials warned that the platform would be closely monitored. Letters were exchanged, meetings were held, investigations quietly began. For months, the confrontation simmered beneath the surface. Then came the fine €20 million, tied to alleged non-compliance with transparency and content risk obligations. To Brussels, it was enforcement. To Musk, it was political signaling. But the real story began after the fine. Initially, the announcement appeared procedural. Headlines framed it as regulatory accountability. But insiders noticed subtle shifts inside Musk's company. Compliance staffing in certain European jurisdictions was reassessed. Technical audits were accelerated. Contingency plans were reviewed. And then came Musk's public response. He described the fine as politically motivated pressure disguised as regulation. He suggested that operating under such constraints might be economically irrational. That phrase echoed far beyond a single post. Economically irrational implies options. It implies alternatives. Within days, users in several EU countries began reporting unusual platform behavior. Feature limitations, account verification inconsistencies, regional interface changes. Official explanations referenced technical alignment. But speculation intensified. Was Musk preparing a partial withdrawal? Was he geofencing features to reduce regulatory exposure? Was this leverage? The number that transformed speculation into shock was 340 million, the estimated European user base potentially affected by operational recalibration. Suddenly, the abstract concept of a fine became a tangible disruption to everyday digital life. Brussels responded swiftly and sternly. Officials warned that deliberate evasion would trigger escalating penalties. Some members of the European Parliament floated the possibility of daily financial sanctions. The rhetoric escalated. Von der Leyen reiterated that no platform is above European law. Musk countered with the pointed question, who elected these speech regulators? The battle lines were drawn. But this conflict isn't merely legal, it's structural. The European Union operates on a supranational model. Member states voluntarily pool sovereignty in exchange for collective strength. That model works efficiently in trade and competition policy. Digital speech, however, is different. It touches identity, politics, and culture. Musk's platform operates globally. Its architecture transcends national borders. When Brussels asserts authority, it's not simply regulating a European subsidiary, it's attempting to shape a global communications network. That's where friction intensifies. On paper, Brussels wields enormous power. The Digital Services Act allows fines up to 6% of global revenue. It permits structural remedies for systemic violations. It establishes investigative authority with cross-border reach. But enforcement in the digital age is complicated. Platforms can restructure corporate entities. They can shift data centers. They can reclassify services. They can challenge rulings in European courts for years. Musk understands leverage. He has fought regulatory battles in the United States and beyond. His strategy often blends public defiance with quiet technical maneuvering. And here's where the drama deepens. National governments within the EU are not monolithic. Some quietly worry about economic consequences if major platforms scale back operations. Others fear political backlash from voters who view Brussels as overreaching. Behind closed doors, according to individuals familiar with discussions, there have been intense conversations. Commission officials seeking guarantees. Company representatives probing for flexibility. Each side calculating reputational risk. Publicly, neither blinks. Privately, contingency plans multiply. At a Brussels press conference, von der Leyen reaffirmed enforcement without fear or favor. Within hours, Musk posted, "Innovation thrives where bureaucracy retreats." The timing was not coincidence. Speculation surged that operational changes were imminent. Analysts debated whether Europe might face a digital fragmentation scenario, different platform versions for different jurisdictions. And in that moment, the abstract became real. Users contemplated losing features. Businesses questioned marketing continuity. Politicians sensed opportunity. We were witnessing a standoff between centralized regulatory authority and concentrated entrepreneurial power. But here is the deeper revelation. This is not fundamentally about moderation guidelines. It is about infrastructure control. The EU has constructed a rules-based digital order. Musk embodies a model of individualistic platform governance. When those paradigms collide, they expose fault lines in modern democracy. Short-term, we are seeing calibrated brinkmanship. Medium-term, precedent is at stake. Long-term, the very architecture of global digital governance could shift. If Musk extracts concessions, other tech giants will test limits. If Brussels forces compliance without compromise, it strengthens regulatory authority. Fragmentation, but risks accelerating fragmentation. There are counter-arguments worth acknowledging. Supporters of EU enforcement argue that platforms wield unprecedented influence and require oversight to prevent abuse. Transparency and accountability are legitimate governance goals. Yet perception matters. When enforcement appears politically selective, trust erodes. When regulatory frameworks intersect with speech outcomes, skepticism grows, and skepticism fuels narrative power. Meanwhile, ripple effects cascade. Investors reassess regulatory exposure. Startups calculate compliance costs. Political movements frame the conflict as sovereignty versus centralization. And here's the strategic layer often missed. Both sides fear precedent more than penalties. If Musk retreats visibly, he risks undermining his free speech brand. If Brussels softens publicly, it risks emboldening every major platform to challenge enforcement. So the standoff continues. Zoom out, and we see a broader pattern unfolding across the Western world. Institutions asserting regulatory expansion. Populist figures challenging centralized norms. Technology serving as both battleground and amplifier. Energy policy disputes, migration crises, fiscal sovereignty debates. The digital clash fits into this continuum. Media narratives often simplify such confrontations as compliance stories. But beneath the surface lies a profound question. Who governs the systems that shape modern life? The institutions built in the 20th century, or the networks engineered in the 21st? For viewers skeptical of centralized governance, this feels emblematic, a test case, and the next developments could reshape more than a single platform. Imagine a negotiated settlement framed as mutual victory. Imagine escalating fines triggering legal warfare. Imagine coordinated action by other jurisdictions inspired by Brussels. Wild cards abound, a sudden court injunction, a political shift within a key.